At that time, mankind was on the brink of extinction, including the evil god Vindrake, who appeared in the sky all of a sudden. There were a lot of monsters creating havoc on the land. The strongest mages were the last hope who could stand against the evil god and get rid of the monsters creating havoc. They kept attacking each other and fighting with various spells, with the monsters creating havoc while the mages had the aim of eliminating them. The leader of the mages, Setsuna, asked his colleagues to prepare their magic spells. They were all ready with a barrier on their hands as they began casting spells and screaming fire, creating the barrier. The leader faced the evil god Vindrake and told him that he was going to be finished there. The mages were all chanting as Setsuna, who was also focused on casting his spells and holding the barrier, told them to combine all 6 magic attributes and fire at the same time. His spells brought about a lightened, bottled-like object, causing an elemental burst. One of the mages screaming admonished the other mages to support Setsuna, as they all made the elemental burst more frightening. Being relaxed and happy, one of them smiled, unknown to them, that made the evil god more angry and dangerous. "No way," a mage said. "Let's hit him harder," as they noticed the evil god was not yet eliminated. Everyone kept striking, but Setsuna suggested they had to observe. As their spell was reaching the evil god, he dispelled it, making Setsuna wonder. The evil god, clenching his jaws, asked if that was what humans could do, calling them foolish and miserable creatures, rotten insects who rotted in his garden. A female mage screamed that there was no way their magic was not working on him, as the other mages kept looking as if they were astonished. She asked Setsuna to give them his order. Setsuna kept thinking that there was something they could still do. They all kept trying various ways to bring the evil god down, as one of the mages was running out of mana. Worriedly, he brought Setsuna's attention to it, telling him his mana was getting exhausted. That made the demon lord attack him as he kept crying for help, asking Setsuna to save him. Setsuna cast a spell, opening his palms with lightning and trying to attack the evil god, but he got flipped out by fire, making him sustain many injuries. Setsuna was bleeding from all parts of his body. The evil god now behind him said that that was a futile struggle. Setsuna said not yet, as he said something like he was casting a spell orally, making an incantation, bringing about another lighting. Setsuna punches the demon god, but Vindrake blocks Setsuna's punch, leaving some damage on the evil god. The evil god groaned as he crossed his arms around his chest. Setsuna, looking at his hands, said it worked. He wondered how such low-level magic, as he had thought, could cause damage to the evil god. He was still staring at his hands, and the brightness of them said he could defeat the evil god with them. The evil god spoke again and asked him if that was as far as he could go. The evil god attacked him as a necklace was shown on his chest, which was given to him by his headmaster in school. He remembered it in school. He held the necklace, glancing at it. The necklace was called the Necklace of Rebirth. His headmaster told him the necklace held the power of the spirit and time. He had the power to redo his past regrets only once. He had asked his headmaster if the necklace wouldn't be a waste on him, as he had never had any regrets. The headmaster laughed in his seat, as he had expected from the top graduate of his magic academy. He stood up, placed his hands on his shoulders, and told him that he was sure he would need it in the future. So, glancing at the necklace, he screamed regret and said his regret was that he didn't pick that magic at that time, saying he would definitely win against the evil god that time around. He was taken back to when he was in the Magic Academy 10 years ago, thanks to the Necklace of Rebirth. He was in class and saw Leo, who was supposed to go missing, before the evil god appeared. He looked around and confirmed that it was the Magic Academy, which he had really gone back to 10 years ago. He then proposed in his mind that he wouldn't let the defeat happen again. He was determined to win against the evil god. The circle of friends was in the ceremony of blessings, and it was his turn next. Setsuna walks up to the teacher to find out his blessing. Setsuna was a very famous person at school. A guy and a lady were whispering to each other as the male student asked if he wasn't the greatest genius of history in the academy. The lady replied that she heard he had the magic affinity for every magic path. It was time for him to choose a magic path. He was told that there were different paths in magic, and in order to activate magic, different techniques were required. That was why one had to choose a magic path, due to which learning of different magic from different paths is difficult. He was asked to choose the path he desired, and the trainer thought his choice would be long-range magic, as he pointed to it, saying that that would be his choice, right? Setsuna knew that was the right choice, as he became the strongest mage in the world with long range, and it was enough to defeat enemies, but he knew it didn't work when he was using it on the evil god. He chose close combat magic, leaving everyone amazed, including Leo, whom he had told earlier that he was going to pick long-range magic. Cyrus Arclight, who was the head of the long-range magic department, tried to give him reasons to change his mind as he informed him that that path was mainly focused on enhancement, meaning he could only attack enemies that were close to him. He told him that the magic path had long been abandoned. Cyrus asked him if he was going to just throw away his future with a worried and bittered expression. Setsuna said he knew all that, and it was hopeless as a mage with such a magic path, but that was the only choice one had in order to defeat the evil god. And in order to get that, he stretched forth his hands, clenched his hands, and chose close combat magic so he could defeat the evil god. That left everyone surprised, including the headmaster. Setsuna was glancing at the close combat magic symbol inscribed on his hand. Cyrus was disappointed. He said he had the intention of entrusting him with all his knowledge. If he had chosen long-range magic, he would have been the strongest mage. Cyrus said that glory was promised to even him, who was Setsuna's mentor. Setsuna thought within him that such a thing as glory would surely be useless in the next 10 years when humanity's defeat would happen, as he began to remember all that had happened, and also the 5 years until the evil god would appear. As Setsuna walked alone, he started thinking about how he could develop the close combat magic before the appearance of the evil god, as he hardly had any practical experience with the magic. All second-year students who had completed the rite of acquisition were asked to proceed to their respective field classrooms. Setsuna realized he didn't know where the classroom of close combat magic was located. He couldn't find Leo, so he went to the guy and lady who were whispering to themselves about him to show him the way. They tried to isolate themselves from him, as they pretended to be late for class and left him there alone. They continued whispering on their way that it was over for Setsuna, as he would surely learn his lessons for choosing such a field to stand out. Setsuna realized that because he chose close combat, the treatment was different from the last time, so he had to find it himself. As he continued thinking, he said that there should be a map of the entire campus in the courtyard, so he walked towards the courtyard. As he was going, he heard noises of people fighting, and he wondered how a fight could be happening in a place like that. Moving forward, he saw 3 guys fighting against a lady. The guys were from the long-range department, while the lady was from the close combat department. The guys took a brooch that was precious to the lady, given to her by her mother. Already bruised, she kept shouting at the guys to give back her brooch. A fat guy among the guys standing at the left side stared at the brooch and asked if that brooch was a magical tool for storing mana. The one in the middle held a fireball, looking sternly at the lady. The last guy said the brooch was too good of a class item to be used by commoners like the lady. He said they would surely make good use of it. Setsuna was watching all this while, and got to know which classes they belonged to. The guy with the fireball told the lady that if she wanted it back, she would have to take it back by force. He threw the fireball at her, but the lady dodged it. She stood up with full force, stating the fact that she would never hand over the brooch her mom saved money for years to buy for her. She magically created a blade that was circled. Setsuna wondered how she could create a mana blade with close combat magic. The guy with the fireball saying that the dagger was not going to have any effect on him. She flipped up and magically attacked them. One of the guys said no matter what she did, the dagger wouldn't get to them because they were long-range mages. They attacked with a fireball again, and as she was about to fall, Setsuna came and carried her amidst the fire. This surprised the guys, and they looked to see who it was. Setsuna, still carrying the lady in his arms, asked her if she knew where the close combat magic department was because he wanted someone to guide him there. The guys kept looking, and one of them asked if that was not Setsuna Crownwell. They noticed the back of his hand and knew that he chose close combat magic. This made the guys think that was the perfect way to beat him up as much as they could since he was in the close combat magic department. One of them magically held a fireball, ready to attack. While Setsuna was watching, he noticed there was room for improvement. He had the thought that the quality of a magic field doesn't really determine the outcome of a battle. The lady noticed he was about to fight against them. She warned him to stop it as they were seniors, but it was too late as the senior student has already launched his fireball spell towards Setsuna. On the other hand, Setsuna, and he was focusing the magic on the legs, using the physical boost only for leg strength. He was really fast, and he believed he could also dodge their attacks. He had it in mind to do more. While they were fighting, he asked the other guys if they couldn't use any other element as they were only shooting fireballs. This angered one of them, as he asked him to shut up. The guy kept wondering what elements he was using, as he couldn't aim well. He was launching his fireballs with rage this time around. Setsuna magically made a blade and sliced all the fire away. The guys were surprised that it could be sliced. Setsuna responded that it was because it was magic against magic, and the one with the higher magic proficiency wins. He also said the reason he, who didn't have high magical powers, became the strongest mage in the world was because of his precise control of power. The guy who seemed to be the leader said he would use an extra large one if that were the case. The other guys warned him that that could catch the attention of the instructor, but he didn't heed what they were saying and told them to shut up. The guy began incantations, but Setsuna using his combat skills could reach the guy faster than his incantations. Setsuna then made a manhwa-fest, hitting the guy so hard, the guy fell, hitting his back on the floor as he screamed. This made the others watch in shock with their mouths wide open. Setsuna, clenching his fist, said that, as expected, he could fight properly even with close combat magic. The fat guy among them told him to stop joking around, saying that close magic was supposed to be the weakest. Setsuna, stretching his hand, told him he was forgetting something. The fat guy handed over the brooch to him, saying to himself that he had to obey him for now. He and the last guy assisted the injured guy in walking away. Setsuna handed the brooch over to the lady, saying it was important to her. She was so happy as she thanked him. And then she remembered she hadn't introduced herself. She introduced herself as Layla Rosewell. She stretched forth her hand. Setsuna also shakes her hand introducing himself, but the girl stated she knew him to be famous for his affinity for all magic paths. They shook each other with both hands. Layla asked why he chose close combat magic. Setsuna thought to himself that was because that would help him defeat the evil god, but no one would believe him. Then he asked if Layla could show him the way to the department's building for close combat magic. Layla suddenly exclaimed, remembering that the orientation for the department would have started already, so they needed to hurry. On their way, Layla told him that the department's building was located at the edge of the campus because close combat magic was unpopular. She called out to him and said he had to teach her how to make the mana blade from earlier. Setsuna told her that was nothing special as it depends on the control of mana, and Layla confirmed herself that close combat magic could be used depending on the circumstances. Setsuna said if he could master close combat magic, then he should be able to counter the dispel of the evil god. He remembered when he had a conversation with the headmaster. The headmaster had shown him his hands, in which two symbols were inscribed. Then he was surprised because it was impossible for one to have two different magic paths. One is supposed to take only one path based on norms. He recognized the magic on his right hand to be the summoning magic, but he couldn't fathom what the left hand was, as he hadn't seen such before. J.E. remembered he had asked the headmaster what that seal was, but his headmaster said he would tell him when the time came, as the headmaster was sure he could entrust him with the secret of his second magic. Unfortunately, he couldn't learn it because the headmaster was assassinated after the emergence of the evil god. He could also sense the danger posed by the headmaster's second magic path. He was determined to learn it and change the fate of destruction. Still in his thoughts, Layla pointed to a building saying over there, snapping him out of his thoughts. But he kept thinking of how he would get the headmaster's recognition, as he already was. That seemed like a problem to him. The professor was standing at the doorway, ready to scold them for coming late. The professor, gritting his teeth with his hands crossed, said how nice it was for him to come late, along with a woman calling him by his full name, Setsuna Crownwell. Layla tried explaining, but the teacher said he didn't care about their excuses. He said no matter how good his achievements were, he was worthless at that place, referring to Setsuna. He also added that now that he was in the department of close combat magic, he was already trash, pointing his hands to Setsuna's chest. Setsuna grabbed his hands and told him he had been rude. He told him that he was the professor of the department, and he did not find any pride in the close combat magic that he was teaching. The professor was angered and held his shirt, calling him a brat, and how dare he act that way against a professor? Setsuna faced him and said that there were still undiscovered possibilities in the close combat magic. He so much believed that. The professor widened his eyes and called him a cheeky brat. He moved away, heading in a direction, saying that if Setsuna was going to say that, he was going to show him something instead. He brought Setsuna to places where students were having tests, and the students were struggling with making a crack on a rock. That was the first test needed to determine one's rank in class. In those black steel rocks, there was a crystal embedded in them. So they needed to extract it as soon as possible, and those who failed would be punished. The professor was walking around and told those taking the test that it had been an hour, and none of them had been able to break it. The students were all complaining, saying the stones were hard. One asked how she could be able to break it with the magic she had learned so far. The students criticized him behind his back, saying he was pissed off because he wasn't chosen to be promoted. The professor said there was still a free rock pointing at a rock. He asked Setsuna to show him the possibilities of close combat magic. He placed his hands on the rock, telling Setsuna that he had only 10 minutes. Layla exclaimed that it was just 10 minutes because it was impossible to break a black steel rock in just 10 minutes, and their rock was much bigger than the rest. The professor held a stopwatch, informing them they had only 9 minutes left, and they were still arguing. Setsuna placed his hands on Layla's shoulders and moved back towards the rock. He placed his hands on it and didn't say anything. The professor mocked him and said he was now speechless, but if he could just bow his head and apologize, he could consider giving him more time. Setsuna refused his offer, saying that 10 seconds was more than enough. Layla called him reckless. The professor told Setsuna that the black steel wasn't just big but also had high density, and even he couldn't break the rock after 30 minutes. Setsuna said he would show him. He had this determination to get recognized by the headmaster, and the only way he could do that was to be the best in his class, and he couldn't let trivial things like breaking a rock hinder his goal. He magically created a blade. The professor thought he didn't know what he was doing and mocked him, saying that he was just all talk after all. He was still talking about what punishment he would give him for disobeying his professor when he got interrupted by the shattering of the rock. The professor was shocked as Setsuna handed him the crystal. Setsuna told him it was 10 seconds. The professor's mouth was wide open. Layla was surprised that he really did it. The other students kept wondering how he could break the huge rock. They were thinking that maybe he was stronger than the professor. The professor opened his mouth and said there was no way he would admit it and that it was cheating. He said the rock was so hard that it wouldn't even shatter in 10 minutes, and if he could do that, it was obvious he cheated. Setsuna said if he could use 10 minutes on a rock like that, it would be better if he quit being a professor and started over again as a student. The professor clenched his fist when the head professor, Lionel, who was smoking behind him, called him Zachary. He placed his hand on the professor's head and asked if he was bullying students again. He told him that Setsuna didn't cheat at all. All he did was read the flow of mana within the rock and aim for the weakest point in it. He scolded Zachary, saying that he was trying to act like an instructor and couldn't see through that. Professor Lionel told everyone that he heard that Professor Zachary was going to demonstrate the mana guard. Professor Zachary was scared and shivered. Professor Lionel steadied his ground and faced Professor Zachary. Professor Zachary kept shouting and asking that Professor Lionel wait, acknowledging the fact that he acted wrong. He promised never to do so again. Professor Zachary launched at him with a fist, creating a barrier. Setsuna noticed the way he broke through the mana guard and knew his level of power was that of a guard. He wondered who that person was, as he didn't seem to be ordinary. Professor Lionel faced Setsuna, complimenting him as he patted him on the back. He told him to do his best. Setsuna told the professor that just because he was a close combatant, he would lose to other departments. He assured the professor that he would use the strength of close combat to his advantage and become the top of his grade. The professor smiled, telling him that's quite some spirit he got. He told Setsuna that if he ever wanted to learn magic, he should just say the word, and he would teach him. He introduced himself officially as the head professor to Setsuna and welcomed him to the close combat department. The professor addressed the students and told them that they were about to decide on the representative for the exchange match, though he hated to say that so soon. The exchange match was a major event where the 8 magic departments competed for honor and prestige. Just one representative would be chosen from each department, and the winner would be determined through a tournament format. Before Setsuna's regression, he won the exchange match as the representative of the long-range combat department. That was how he earned recognition from the headmaster. Since he also wanted to be recognized by the headmaster, he couldn't afford to miss out on the representative position, as that was what determined if he could participate in the exchange match. As the other students faced Lionel, and Lionel told Setsuna that he wasn't the only one who passed the test, and there was someone who had extracted the crystal before their arrival. That person was Drago Okred. Drago faced Setsuna. He asked Setsuna what made him choose close combat, despite the fact that he had aptitude for other magic paths. Setsuna told him he had things to be done with close combat magic. Drago asked him to keep quiet, stating that Setsuna had a small stature and wouldn't be able to do anything with that. He clenched his fist and squatted, saying that his family's lineage had excelled exclusively in close combat magic for generations, so he had spent years training his body for that same purpose. Drago attacked Setsuna, but Setsuna, as he didn't even bulge. Drago told Setsuna to fight him because he wouldn't let the representative position go to a mere pretender who came to close combat as a joke. Setsuna suddenly remembered that he had heard the name Drago during the representative match before the regression as the only man known to the lowly close combat department. He agreed to have the fight with Drago. Professor Lionel informed them that the match would be after a week. Drago told Setsuna not to think of escaping during that week because, as a close combat mage, one has to fight till the end. The other students kept pondering who would win. A lady asked that no matter how much talent he had, he would not be able to beat Drago, right? Layla went to meet Setsuna and asked him if he could win. Setsuna said no, making Layla scream. He said he couldn't beat him with his trained physique, and he couldn't compete with him in his current state. He said he had a secret plan as he was walking away. Layla called out to him, asking him where he was going. He kept walking through a pathway until he got to a tree. Layla asked him where that place was. Setsuna said it was a secret spot that only he knew of, and at that place, he would become 3 times stronger as he raised his hands and green aura moved over him. Setsuna said it seemed he was being recognized by the tree again as he noticed the aura surrounding his body. Layla asked what the green aura meant, and he said it was the blessing of the sacred tree. He added that it was only given to those who had been acknowledged by the sacred tree, and thanks to mana attributes, he could recover his mana by facing the tree. He said he had found the tree before his regression, and as long as he was at that place, he had no worries about running out of mana. He was determined to train there until he met his limits. Layla was amazed at this, but she reminded Setsuna that Drago was a natural-born close combat mage. Layla thought that Setsuna helped her get her brooch back, so it was now her turn to help him. At the close combat department training room, Layla found Drago using magic to lift weights, as she was surprised. She thought to herself that he was really the odd one. Drago asked Professor Lionel if those black steel rocks were still in the yard. The professor asked if he had the intention of crushing the rocks. Drago stood and moved towards the door as he waved to the professor, telling him he wasn't going to break the rocks but just wanted to borrow them. Drago arranged 5 black steel bars on his back and did push-ups. Layla gets shocked to see Drago's training and rushes towards Setsuna to tell him about everything that Layla saw about Drago's training. Setsuna was sitting down in a quiet place, reading the book of martial arts. She ran up to him and told him that was not the time to be relaxed, informing him of what Drago was currently doing. Setsuna said he had expected that, as it was already obvious he would do that to train his physique. He told Layla not to worry, and that was also part of his plans as blue aura showed in his eyes. Layla wondered what the plan was, and he told her that one has to focus on the hands if one wants to boost the hands, and the same with the legs. If you also want to boost memory, you do the same with it. Just by focusing on the head, you would age the techniques in your head, and once you put them into practice, it would make it easier. He was focused on fighting, and Layla was amazed at this, as she had not heard of a method to learn fast. He felt dizzy, fell down, and sustained a little injury. He said he was merely pushing his bodies to the limit with a physical boost, and he was just focused on boosting his healing. He kept assuring himself he could strengthen his body in a short time. Layla told him that he didn't need to push himself so hard and he could look for other methods, as she asked if there were other ways. Setsuna said there was no way, and he couldn't keep up with Drago with half-baked methods, considering the fact that Drago had been training for years in close combat magic. He said he needed to destroy and reconstruct methods thousands more times in the space of the remaining week. Layla gets shocked hearing this as Setsuna mentioned it 1,000 times, because just a single cycle was already painful. Setsuna thinks that it wasn't like that, as Setsuna thought about the time when Setsuna was young, and when every time Setsuna was training, he always reminded him of that time, and at that time, he couldn't use any magic. Every day, he spent his time practicing. Even when he failed, he kept on practicing, and even if his growth was slow, he got better step by step. That made him sure that, as long as he could get stronger, that was nothing. They kept on practicing, and his hard work made Layla know that he had really been working harder than anyone. On the day of the match, both of them faced each other, and Drago mocked Setsuna, asking him that so that he wouldn't run away. Setsuna said he wouldn't run away after all. He was the representative for the close combat department. Professor Lionel asked if they were ready as he stretched his hands, signaling for a start. It started as both of them were ready to launch against each other.